What would you do if, while walking through a quiet forest, you suddenly found an elderly veteran chained to a tree? How would you react? Would you hesitate or rush to help? Would you believe his story? It was early morning in Millfield, a small town where life usually moved slow and peaceful. Sheriff Tom Harper was on his usual patrol, accompanied by Max, his sharp and loyal German shepherd. The cool autumn air filled their lungs as the mist wove through the tall oaks and maples, casting shadows that danced with the first light of dawn. Max suddenly stopped, ears pricked forward, his body stiffening like a coiled spring. The sheriff tightened his grip on the leash. Max was no ordinary dog. He had a nose for trouble and a heart full of loyalty. Tom trusted him more than anyone else in town. A faint sound broke the silence, a soft whimpering mixed with the crunch of dry leaves. It wasn't an animal's cry. It was human and desperate. They moved cautiously toward the sound until, through the trees, they saw him. An elderly man chained to a sturdy oak tree, his wrists raw and bleeding. His clothes were torn and stained with dirt, and his eyes, oh, his eyes, were filled with a mix of fear, pain, and something else, a silent plea. Tom's heart tightened. He had seen tough situations before, but nothing like this. This man, despite his frailty, had a quiet strength. Tom's mind raced with questions. Who could do this to a man, let alone a veteran? "Sir, can you hear me?" Tom called softly, kneeling down a few feet away. The man's lips trembled as he tried to speak. "Help. Please. Marines. Betrayed." The words were weak but urgent. Tom looked around, scanning the woods for any sign of whoever had done this. But there was only silence. Max, sensing the man's distress, began digging furiously near the base of the tree. Tom helped, and soon they uncovered a small, dirt-caked metal box. Inside, folded carefully, was a yellowed letter. Tom unfolded it, reading aloud slowly. "To whoever finds this, I am Henry Cole, a Marine veteran. I was left here, chained and forgotten by those I once trusted. I carry their secrets, and I am alive to tell the truth. Please help me." The weight of those words sank deep. Tom worked quickly to unlock the chains binding Henry. As soon as the shackles fell away, Henry sagged with relief but struggled to stand. Tom offered his hand. "Let's get you out of here." As they walked back toward the town, Henry's story began to unravel. He spoke of comrades lost, of betrayal within his own ranks, and a secret he had sworn to keep, until now. Tom noticed the tattoo on Henry's arm, an intricate design only a few veterans carried. It was a symbol of brotherhood, sacrifice, and loyalty. Max stayed close, growling low whenever Henry showed signs of pain or weakness, protective as if sensing the man's silent strength. By the time they reached the town's edge, Tom knew this was no ordinary rescue. It was the start of a story that would shake Millfield to its core. And Henry? He wasn't just a victim. He was a survivor. A man with a mission to reveal truths buried deep beneath years of silence. Tom glanced down at Max, whose eyes seemed to say, "We're just getting started." When the townsfolk of Millfield first saw Henry Cole being led out of the woods, their faces held a mixture of shock, curiosity, and sympathy. News traveled fast in a small town, and this story was unlike any they'd heard before. Henry was quiet but steady, leaning on Sheriff Tom for support as they made their way to the sheriff's office. The veteran's body showed the marks of his ordeal, bruises, cuts, and the raw skin where the chains had bitten deep. Yet there was something else, a calm determination that seemed to radiate from him, even in pain. Inside the office, Tom helped Henry into a chair and went to fetch water. The room was small and plain, but to Henry, it felt like a safe haven. He took a long, slow sip before speaking. "They left me out there for what? A week, maybe more. I lost track," Henry said, his voice rough but clear. "I thought no one would find me." Tom sat down across from him, listening carefully. "Who did this to you, and why?" Henry's eyes darkened. "People I called brothers, Marines I trusted with my life. But something went wrong. I uncovered something dangerous. something they didn't want me to know. Tom leaned in. What did you uncover? Henry swallowed hard, the memory pulling at him like a shadow. A plan, illegal shipments, corrupt officials. Some of the people I trusted were part of it. When I threatened to expose them, they decided I was a liability. Did you report this to anyone? Tom asked. I tried, but my word against theirs, not enough. I started asking questions, digging deeper. Then they took me, chained me out, there to silence me. Tom's mind raced. Corruption, betrayal. This was more than just a rescue. It was the uncovering of a dangerous secret hidden within the town's own fabric. Just then, Max whined softly, pressing against Henry's leg, as if to remind them both of the silent bond that had brought them here. The sheriff pulled out his phone. We'll get you medical help, and then you'll tell me everything, step by step. Henry nodded, exhaustion etched on his face but eyes still sharp. There's more. They didn't just want to silence me. They wanted to send a message. Tom frowned. A message to who? Henry's gaze flickered to the window. To anyone else who might stand up, to anyone who dares to fight back. Outside, the town was waking up, unaware that beneath its calm surface, a storm was quietly gathering. Tom called for backup. State police and federal agents were brought in quietly. This was bigger than Millfield. The veterans' information was explosive, enough to implicate powerful people. Meanwhile, Henry's story began to spread among the townspeople. Some were skeptical. After all, how could their peaceful town hide such darkness? Others felt a surge of anger and protectiveness toward the man who'd suffered so much for them all. Jason, a young Marine recruit and the sheriff's nephew, visited Henry in the office. His eyes were wide with respect and concern. Sir, I'm sorry this happened to you. I want to help. Henry smiled faintly. It's not about me anymore, Jason. It's about making sure no one else suffers like I did. Jason nodded. We won't let them get away with this. Days passed, and the investigation intensified. Documents were uncovered, witnesses interviewed. Slowly, the web of corruption started unraveling, but the danger grew too. Henry wasn't the only target. The same people who had betrayed him were watching, waiting, and ready to strike again. Tom kept Max close at all times. The dog's keen senses were their first line of defense, warning of threats before they appeared. One evening, as Tom reviewed files late into the night, a knock came at the door. It was Henry, his face pale but determined. I need to show you something, he said quietly. In his pocket was a small, worn notebook. This has everything, names, dates, places, proof they can't ignore. Tom took the book carefully. We'll keep you safe, and together we'll bring them down. Henry's voice dropped to a whisper. For all the veterans, the forgotten ones, the ones still out there suffering, this is for them. The sheriff looked at Henry with newfound respect. This quiet, chained man was a warrior in a different battle, one that required courage, patience, and unbreakable spirit. As the night deepened, Tom knew their fight was far from over. But he also knew they weren't alone, because in the heart of Millfield, under the watchful eyes of a loyal dog and a determined sheriff, justice was waking up. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog, thick, heavy, and uncertain. Henry's revelations had opened a door that no one in Millfield was ready to face. Yet once that door was open, it couldn't be closed again. Sheriff Tom Harper found himself torn between his duty to protect the town and the weight of the secrets Henry carried. The quiet veteran, once chained and abandoned, had now become the key to uncovering a dangerous conspiracy. Henry's small notebook was a treasure trove of names, dates, and meetings, a roadmap of betrayal and greed. The more Tom read, the clearer it became. This was not just about one man's survival. It was about the soul of Millfield itself. Despite the growing threat, Henry's spirit remained steady. There was a fire in his eyes, a stubborn refusal to let darkness win. One afternoon, as the sheriff's office buzzed with activity, Henry shared more of his story. It wasn't just the chains on his wrists or the bruises on his skin that told the tale. It was the invisible scars, the broken trust, the silent pain of comrades lost to lies. I enlisted to protect, Henry said quietly. Not just from outside threats, but from the poison inside. And sometimes that poison comes from within our own ranks. Tom listened closely. He saw the pain behind the veteran's words, the burden of a man who had witnessed too much but refused to stay silent. The investigation pressed on. Federal agents combed through records while the local police interviewed witnesses. Henry's courage inspired others to speak up, breaking years of silence, but the deeper they dug, the more dangerous it became. One evening, Tom received a call, an anonymous warning. "Stop asking questions or you'll regret it." Tom's jaw tightened. Threats were expected, but this one carried a cold certainty that sent a chill down his spine. He looked at Henry, who met his gaze without fear. "They want us scared," Henry said. "But fear is what got me chained to that tree. I won't let it win again." Around town, whispers grew. Some believed Henry, others doubted. A few quietly sided with the powerful figures now exposed by the investigation. Jason, the young Marine recruit, came to visit again. "Sir, they're watching. Be careful." Tom read it with a frown. "They're closing in." Henry folded the note slowly. "Then we don't hide." In that moment, Tom realized Henry wasn't just a survivor. He was a fighter, a man who would risk everything to bring truth to light. As the investigation deepened, the town began to change. Old friendships fractured, new alliances formed. But one thing remained clear. Henry Cole had sparked a fire that couldn't be extinguished. The veteran who was once chained and forgotten was now a symbol, a reminder that courage isn't about size or strength, but about standing up when it's hardest. And in the shadows of Millfield, the battle for justice was only just beginning. The tension in Millfield was palpable. The quiet streets, once peaceful, now carried an undercurrent of fear and uncertainty. Henry's story had shaken the town to its core, stirring old wounds and new hopes alike. Sheriff Tom Harper knew the stakes had never been higher. Each step forward in the investigation was met with resistance, sometimes subtle, sometimes violent. But Henry's courage was infectious. More and more people started to come forward, their voices adding to the growing chorus demanding justice. One morning, Tom found Henry sitting on the porch of the sheriff's office, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Max lay quietly at his feet, ever vigilant. "Can't believe how fast things have changed," Henry said, breaking the silence. "1 week ago I was chained to a tree, forgotten. Now I'm at the center of something I never asked for." Tom nodded, understanding the weight Henry carried. "You're doing what most wouldn't dare. That takes strength." Henry smiled faintly. "It's not strength, Sheriff. It's desperation. When you see the truth buried beneath lies, you fight, not just for yourself, but for everyone who's been silenced." Their conversation was interrupted by a call from the federal agents. A breakthrough, a shipment linked to the corrupt network, was intercepted just outside the town. "This is it," Tom said, standing up. "We're closing in." Henry's eyes lit with a mix of relief and determination. Finally, that afternoon, a coordinated operation took place. Federal agents, local police, and even a few veterans who had rallied behind Henry surrounded the warehouse where illegal goods were stored. The tension was thick, each second dragging like an eternity. Inside, the corrupt officials were caught off guard. Documents, cash, and weapons were seized. Evidence that would be impossible to deny. But the victory was bittersweet. Not everyone was innocent. Some faces in the town, once trusted, were now stained with betrayal. Henry stood quietly outside the warehouse as the arrests were made. The scars on his body ached, but his heart felt lighter. This was justice. Slow, painful, but necessary. Later that evening, Tom and Henry sat in the sheriff's office, the weight of the day settling over them. "Did you ever think it would come to this?" Tom asked. Henry shook his head. "No, but I always hoped that standing up would make a difference." Tom looked out the window at the darkening sky. "It has. You've inspired this town." Henry sighed. "I'm just a man who refused to be broken." The following days brought both healing and reckoning. Families confronted uncomfortable truths. Friendships strained under the pressure, but a new sense of hope took root. Jason visited Henry again, bringing news from the base. "The Marines are proud of you. They want to help more veterans like you." Henry smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes. That means everything. But amidst the progress, threats continued. Anonymous calls, shadowy figures watching from a distance. The danger was far from over. One night, Max alerted Tom to movement outside the office. When Tom looked out, he saw a figure disappear into the darkness. "We're not safe yet," Tom warned. Henry nodded. "We never were. But now, we fight with the truth on our side." The town of Millfield had been tested, pushed to its limits. And through it all, a quiet old veteran had become the heartbeat of its fight for justice. As the stars twinkled overhead, Henry and Tom prepared for whatever came next. Because sometimes, the greatest battles are not fought with guns, but with courage and the refusal to give up. The morning after the warehouse raid felt different. A strange stillness had settled over Millfield. The kind that creeps in after a storm, when you're not sure whether to rebuild or brace for the next one. Sheriff Tom Harper stood at the front steps of the town courthouse, sipping coffee from a paper cup. He watched as people passed, some nodding respectfully, others avoiding eye contact entirely. Whispers still followed him, but something deeper had started to change. Respect for the truth was outweighing the fear of it. Inside, Henry sat at the long wooden bench, waiting for his scheduled testimony. The courtroom buzzed with reporters, townsfolk, and law enforcement. Jason sat nearby, straight-backed, dressed in full Marine uniform. His presence wasn't required, but it was felt. Henry had refused to wear anything but his weathered flannel shirt and jeans. "I'm not dressing up to tell the truth," he'd said with a chuckle that morning. "Let them see the man they left in the woods." Tom stepped inside and approached him. "You ready for this?" Henry gave a slow nod. "I've waited years to be heard. I'm not about to back down now." The gavel cracked, and the courtroom quieted. Henry stepped forward. Each step echoed in the still room. His limp was visible now, but his back was straight, his chin up. He took the oath and sat, folding his weathered hands in front of him. "What happened to you, Mr. Cole?" the attorney asked. And so he began. He spoke of the years after his discharge, the classified missions, the betrayal that tore through his unit. Of the day he was told to forget everything, when his life became too inconvenient to protect. And finally, of the men who found him weeks ago, beat him, and chained him like a dog. The room was silent. You could hear the ticking of the wall, clock, the scratch of pens. Henry's voice never wavered. He didn't cry, but his words held so much pain, so much truth, that even the most hardened listener felt their throat tighten. "I was left in the dirt to die," Henry said quietly, "but I didn't, because dying without speaking out, that would have been the real death." One of the town council members shifted uncomfortably. Another wiped his eyes. The opposing attorney stood. "Mr. Cole, do you have any proof that these alleged operations and cover-ups happened?" Without flinching, Henry pulled a small USB from his pocket. These files came from an old contact. He was scared, but he sent them before he vanished. Names, signatures, even recordings. "I've backed them up 3 times. One's in the hands of a journalist right now. If anything happens to me..." He left the rest hanging. The judge looked at the documents, her expression unreadable. "We'll recess to review." As the crowd filtered out, Jason clapped Henry on the back. "You did it, sir. You told the world." Henry gave a tired smile. The world still has to listen. Outside, protesters had gathered. Some carried signs supporting Henry. Others, a small but loud group, called him a liar, a troublemaker, an old man trying to rewrite history. Tom saw Henry hesitate before stepping outside. "You sure you want to walk through that?" Henry nodded. "If I can survive war, betrayal, and being chained to a damn tree, I can walk through a few words." They stepped out. The crowd parted. Max, the dog, walked beside Henry like a bodyguard. Jason flanked him. Tom stood behind. And Then it happened. An older man stepped forward from the crowd, holding a faded photo. "Henry Cole?" he asked. Henry turned. "Yeah? I served with you. Vietnam. We ran supplies together near Da Nang. I never forgot what you did for my brother." Henry squinted at the photo. And then recognition bloomed across his face. "Billy?" he whispered. The man nodded, tears in his eyes. "They told me you were dead." Henry laughed through his own tears. They tried to make it true. The crowd quieted. Some protesters lowered their signs. Others just stood, confused, unsure of what to believe anymore. That's the thing about truth. When it finally surfaces, it doesn't need to shout. It just is. The news that night showed clips of the testimony. National networks picked up the story. Headlines called Henry a ghost of valor, a living witness to corruption, but he didn't care about fame. He only wanted justice, and maybe a little peace. Back at the sheriff's house that night, Tom poured them each a glass of whiskey. "To the stubborn ones," Tom said, raising his glass. Henry raised his. "To the ones who keep standing." Max barked once, tail wagging, as if to say he agreed. The fire crackled. The room was quiet. Tom looked at Henry, his expression soft. "You think it's over?" he asked. Henry leaned back. "No, but I think the worst is behind us. And I think the town is waking up." Silence settled again. Then, Henry said something he hadn't said aloud until now. "For the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm not alone." Tom looked over and nodded. "You're not." And in that quiet space, something sacred passed between them. A kind of peace born not from safety but from being seen, from being heard. The town of Millfield hadn't had this many news vans since the tornado of '98. Satellite dishes spun like metal sunflowers. Cameras clicked with every footstep, and everywhere you turned, someone whispered the name, Henry Cole. But inside Sheriff Tom Harper's small station, it was quieter. Not silent, but quieter. Afterward, a girl approached. "My brother's in the Navy. He won't talk about what happened, but I'll tell him about you." Henry nodded. "Tell him he's not broken, just waiting." That night, sitting on the porch, Tom and Jason joined him. "You ever think about moving to the city?" Tom asked. Henry sipped his tea. "Too loud. I prefer the company of birds." Jason laughed. "Well, if you ever do, there's a big world out there that could use your voice." Henry looked out toward the trees. "I think," he said slowly, "the world already heard what it needed to. Now it's time to let the echoes work." They sat in silence for a while, until Max barked once and trotted off toward the trees, tail wagging. Henry followed slowly, smiling. Some say Henry died peacefully 2 years later. Others say he simply disappeared one day into the woods, like the soldier he was, quiet, unseen, but always watching. The tree where he was once chained is now a memorial site, no marble, no gold, just a wooden plaque that reads, "Here stood a man who refused to remain silent. May we always listen." Moral message: the scars we carry in silence can become maps for others, if we dare to speak. Courage is not always loud. Sometimes, it's a whisper that refuses to fade. In a world obsessed with noise, truth still echoes. And one voice, no matter how weathered, can silence an entire town and awaken a nation.